What if I told you that you could make a fire that only you could see? Any passers-by will be totally oblivious to the presence of you and your fire. Well, if you want to get into stealth camping, build a fire during gale force winds, or just want to lay low, then the Dakota fire hole is just what you need. First things first, you'll need to dig a pretty deep hole. About 2 to 3 feet deep is a good standard, but the bigger the fire you're planning to build, the deeper and wider you'll have to dig. So it's ultimately up to your discretion. I'll be making a small personal fire, so I'll go 2 foot deep and 1.5 feet wide. As long as you go balls deep and don't be a bitch about it, you can get the hole dug in 5 minutes flat. But I would suggest using some form of entrenching tool. You can use a stick in your bare hands if you wish, but that will take significantly longer and you'll probably want to kill yourself halfway through out of frustration. Now step 2, you'll need to dig a smaller hole about 1 foot away from the first hole. You don't need to dig as deep for this one, but a depth of 1.5 feet is a best practice. This hole will connect to the primary hole via a tunnel. The purpose of this secondary hole and tunnel is to allow oxygen to flow into the fire, as the heat and flame spewing up out of the bigger hole won't allow any oxygen to enter from above. This secondary hole also allows you to blow oxygen into the fire yourself with your breath, without you running the risk of burning your eyebrows off if you chose to do that over the primary hole. So, go Viet Cong on this bad boy. Keep tunnelling your way through until you reach the other side. Keep digging away at the edges until it's big enough for you to fit your whole arm through like a cheap hooker. The bigger the tunnel, the more oxygen that can enter, meaning a more sustainable fire. Now that's all done, it's time to build the fire. The same practices of traditional fire making still apply. A raised wooden platform to keep your fire off the ground that will burn down into a layer of embers over time. Utilise dead dry materials that have been hanging off the ground. Y'all already know the deal. Make the fire as you would make it on the surface. You can fiddle about with the structure of the fire in any way you see fit. Make a teepee, make a perimeter, a log cabin build. It's up to you, man. If you want to cook over this type of fire, then it's just a simple matter of placing thick, living green branches either over the top of the hole or jam them into the side of the walls. Living green materials won't burn over the fire, so your cookware will be safe to rest upon it. As you can see, if you wander off into the distance to perhaps gather some more materials, you may find it difficult to locate your camp again, since there's so little smoke and no visible flame. Good stuff. There's a common misconception that these types of underground fires produce no smoke. That carries some truth, but it's not strictly true. An underground fire does burn hotter and more intensely than one that's exposed to the colder atmosphere on the surface, and that does limit its smoke emittance, but there's a lot of chemistry involved in explaining why that is. Maybe I'll save that for another video. Don't want to go too off track here. But if we refer back to the list of smoke generators I included in my signal and rescue video, wet materials, resinous materials and green materials will still produce smoke. So it's best to utilise the driest and deadest possible materials you can find if you really want to limit your visibility. That means no scraping up the dead leaves from the damp ground like a lazy bastard. The smokeless fire pit comes from a rather unique way of building fire. We think of fire building as a bottom-up process, whereby we'll build a base fire, then add material on top of it. For a smokeless fire we need to flip things upside down and have our fuel wood on the bottom with our fire on the top. The fire on the top is started with copious amounts of kindling, constantly fed with dry small twigs and dry wood shavings directly on top of the fire, which will burn the larger pieces of fuel wood below. And the reason this produces no smoke is because the airflow from the secondary hole has to work its way up through the fuel wood, and it pushes all the gases and vapours, which we call smoke, which comes from the moisture, resins and oils contained within the fuel wood. The air pushes that up into the hot flames, where it burns off because of the heat intensity of underground flames. If those gases and vapours didn't have to travel upwards through the flame, like in a traditional fire, then you would have a smoky fire. Anyway, that's a tricky way of making fire, and I'm waffling on a bit. So basically, make sure your fuel wood is either under the flame, in the flame, or hugging tightly to the sides of the flame. If your fuel wood is hanging high above your flame, or chilling way to the side of it, then the moisture and gases will be released in the form of smoke, as opposed to burned off in the flame in the process of combustion. Just remember that smoke is incomplete combustion. If you see smoke, then it's usually a sign that some materials are getting neglected, so shape up. It's a simple concept. Dig a hole, build a fire in a hole, use dry materials. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And when you're done, be a gent and fill the hole back up. There's no need to break people's ankles as they pass on by in the future. Peace, bros.